Welcome to the Holotropic Psychedelic Integration Podcast. I'm Art Granoff at referenceastrology.com. Today we hear directly from Stan Grof from October 2011 at the Insight and Opening Retreat in Joshua Tree, California, led by Jack Kornfield, Stan, and Christina Grof. Please leave your comments below.
Explain why we think we should do holotropic breathwork or work with holotropic states of consciousness of some other kind. Again, I don't specifically emphasize holotropic breathwork, but I really believe in the healing power of these holotropic states. There could be shamanic rituals of some kind, rites of passage. It could be some systematic spiritual practice within which it happens. It could be support for people in spiritual emergency. So any form of these non-ordinary states, what can we expect from it? Why would we do it? So I will say something about what I believe they can do for us individually, but also collectively. If you look at the world today, it's not a very nice picture. And so is there anything in this process of working with holotropic states that could help us in this crisis and give us a better chance for survival? So I'm trained as a clinical psychiatrist, so I started this whole thing by trying to find some more powerful way of healing rather than talking, free associations, which in my own 7 years of psychoanalysis, I didn't find a particularly transformative or obviously transformative procedure. So we see a lot of people breaking out of depression. We see people working through phobias, releasing what Wilhelm Reich called character armor, a lot of pent-up energies in the body. When there's propensity to aggression, to violence, you can certainly clear that by finding ways of expressing that energy. Today, after years of working with these states, I cannot imagine being a psychiatrist in an admission ward and somebody comes, with a lot of aggression, and I would say, well, let's give him or her tranquilizers. It just doesn't make any sense. Aggression is energy. So we say, where's the mattress, and let's get two people, and let's get it out, rather than be sure that it's there, it stays there, and that it doesn't manifest. A lot of psychosomatic problems. We have seen people working through migraine headaches. We have seen people working through asthma. In some instances, what's called Raynaud disease, when you cannot get your hands warm, very, very cold hands. So there are all these, psychosomatic pains of various kinds and so on. So that's one aspect, something that you can expect from, systematic, responsible work with these holotropic states. But then there is some much, much broader, much deeper significance. And I use for this discussion this tanka that you probably know. It summarizes the teachings of Vajrayana. It's the Lord of Death holding the Wheel of Life. And the Wheel of Life are 6 realms or lokas. And they have several functions. They are, you can say, to Jungian terminology, archetypal domains that we can experience as part of the dying process, but we can also experience it as part of our self-exploration. Those archetypes are there. You don't have to wait until you are dying. You can visit those states. And I mentioned that also the archetypal realm kind of forms and informs what is happening here. So you could find for each of those domains some kind of a expression. I think Jack frequently talks about that one realm, which is the hungry ghost. If you want to find out how it manifests in our world, go to Las Vegas. Or, you know, the realm of these jealous gods. This would be something like Pentagon or similar, you know, similar institutions all over the world. The realm of the gods, sort of people living in, you know, in riches and very comfortable. Realm of the wild animals. You can be brought up in a family where there is a lot of violence, so that many of the animal impulses are actually expressed in everyday life. There's also realms where hell would somehow project into the three-dimensional world. The concentration camps, for example, have been called hell on earth. All these, you know, basic elements have been really enacted there in real life. Christina and I went to Hiroshima, and nothing that we read about Hiroshima really prepared us to what we saw there. This was all wooden structures, so near the epicenter everything just was evaporated, and then the rest on the periphery, it was all burning, and people were trying to save themselves, jumping into the river, but the river was boiling. They got boiled alive. So you know those images of Japanese hot hell, and was literally what was happening there was this archetypal domain somehow becoming part of life. So anyway, these are the lokas. The Deva Loka, Asura Loka, Preta Loka, Nara Loka, Manaka Loka. So those are the realms. But what we are particularly interested in is that center, where you can see a descending and ascending path. And then in the very middle are three animals. There is a snake, there is a rooster, and there is a pig. And they have symbolic meaning. But the snake, they're basically forces that keep us on the wheel and that are a source of suffering in the world. So the snake represents aggression. The pig represents ignorance, and the rooster represents attachment, desire, attachment. It's again a very important force that keeps us on the wheel. Now, if you work with holotropic states, you get a chance to work with all these three different elements. In the original Hinayana Buddhism, the idea was that this is a realm of suffering, and you basically want to move out of here. Nirvana is related to vata in Sanskrit, which means wind. So it's evanescence, it's blowing the torches of life, completely moving out of the samsaric world. In Mahayana Buddhism, you have a different understanding of this, that you can experience nirvana to the extent to which you can reduce the influence of these three forces in your life. And so I would like to talk a little about what the holotropic states can do. So if you start with ignorance, you can, for example, regress into your childhood, and you find out that some significant things, traumas happened in your childhood that still are seriously influencing your present life. Not only can you find out that these problems are there because they were repressed, they were forgotten, but you can actually work with them, you can change them, you can free yourself from that. You can relive your birth, and you can really bring the emotions and the trapped physical energies to the surface, and you can free yourself from that very, very powerful imprint. You can experience something from prenatal life. But then you can go beyond that. You can identify with other people and get deep insight into them. You can identify with members of other species. You can get insight into nature. You get information that you did not have before, and so on. Now, this is just collecting information about the material world. That's really not the deepest meaning of the pig. The pig represents what's called avidya, which is a very fundamental ignorance about who we are and what it is all about. And that's really something that the holotropic states can help us, because they help us to discover that there are hidden dimensions of reality that are extremely important in shaping the fabric of the universe itself, but they are not available, they are not accessible to an average person in the ordinary state of consciousness. You have to really be in a holotropic state of consciousness to discover things like the collective unconscious in its historical aspect, the collective unconscious in this archetypal aspect, to discover, that there are invisible beings, the archetypal figures, that there are archetypal realms that you can experience, and that play really an important role in that whole cosmic game. Then we can look at the second one, which is the rooster, which is the desire. Gandhi said, there is enough in the world to satisfy everybody's need. There's not enough to satisfy everybody's greed. So we're dealing with this, very fundamental human drive, which is never enough. Where do we have enough money? Where do we have enough power? Where do we have enough fame? So there is a tendency to pursue some linear goals, feeling some sense of dissatisfaction with who we are, what we have available, what our resources are, and then our mind sort of creates a certain image of a more satisfactory future, and we set ourselves for a journey to achieve that goal. And then two things can happen. One is the goal is simply too ambitious, you don't achieve it, and then you would have the feeling that your dissatisfaction comes from the fact that you couldn't achieve that corrective goal. The second thing that happens is you get there and you wake up in the morning and you have your diploma, or you have your $1 million, or position in the world, or whatever, and you find out that not a lot has changed in your basic life feelings, basic feelings about yourself. So the thing is, what went wrong? Well, the goal was not ambitious enough. A medical degree is not enough. You have to get a PhD degree on top, or $1 million is not enough. If you had $2 million, that would really transform life. Joseph Campbell talked about, and Christina mentioned it already, getting to the top of the ladder and finding that it's against the wrong wall. And basically, we cannot get enough of something that we don't really need, or ultimately don't even want, you see. So this, no matter what you achieve in the material world, it simply does not give you what you expected from that. Werner Erhard said in one of the S training, he said, the psychologists train rats, and they put them in mazes, and at the end of some of the corridors is cheese, and in some others there's no cheese at all. He said your average rat will find very quickly those corridors where there is cheese. He says only people are not like that. We keep going into the corridors where we have found out in the past there ain't any cheese. So now what is this drive, you see, to always wanting something more, something bigger? Now a significant part of this, beyond any kind of biographical programs that you might have, is the fact that we carry in our psyche like unfinished gestalt of the birth process. For example, if you do the faster breathing, many people quite quickly find themselves in the birth canal. Now, if an hour of faster breathing is enough to get you there, to some extent you live in the birth canal in everyday life. Your sort of part of you is really here, part of you still is connected with the memory that has not been finished. So what it basically creates is a feeling of dissatisfaction that can take many different forms. And then what the existentialists called auto-projecting, self-projecting happens. You create some kind of an image of a situation where circumstances would be better, life would be great. What do you need? Money, diplomas, power, fame, and so on. And then you would set yourself in that direction. Now, if you don't go inside and you deal with the material per se, which is processing the birth memory, and you just sort of act that drive out in some kind of projects in everyday life, no matter what you achieve is not really fully satisfy that craving for something else, for something bigger. There is a story about Alexander the Great, who, I'll tell it a little later. So anyway, so that's so this is the situation. You can release a lot of that by bringing the memory of birth to the surface. You express the emotions. You express the physical pent-up energies, and that can significantly improve somehow how you feel about yourself, how you feel about the world, the ability to be more in the present moment and kind of enjoy what is available rather than always wanting something that is not available. It changes somehow the general strategy of life. Before there was that drive into the future, towards some kind of a future project. So that the idea was to compete with the competitors, remove the obstacles, remove the or fight the enemies, and achieve that particular goal. Now, if you now free yourself from that drive to get out of the confines of the birth canal, people say life has become more like martial arts. If you do martial arts, you kind of see what energies are around you and then find automatic way how to respond to them. Even better image is something that Ramdas mentioned years ago in Prague at a conference. He says, the life becomes more like surfing. You see, where am I? Where are the energies going? How do I fit? Oh, this way. Okay. And now we're changing, we're going this way. You cannot say when you're surfing, now I'm going to go left. This would not be a very good outcome. So now people who are able to move their life strategy in this direction, that it's more like martial arts or more like surfing, they actually find out that they can achieve more with less effort. And they discover also something quite extraordinary, that synchronicities start happening that seem to be helping them in accomplishing that particular project. You know, the right kind of people show up, even the money or the right kind of an information. And there's another characteristic of this kind of a strategy, that it will satisfy us, but it also serves a larger purpose. It's not sort of exclusive, that you achieve something at the expense of others, like in competition and so on. So this is basically what's called Wu Wei in Taoism. It's called the creative quietude, or doing by being, rather than having a concept of what we want to achieve in the world. So going through the psychospiritual death rebirth process can really, significantly move you in that direction. But there's enough of the ego element left, and that seems to be coming from the transpersonal level. I would just refer to Ken Wilber's work, where he talks about the Atman project, how our true nature is divine. He uses the concept from perennial philosophy. And somehow in the process of reincarnation, we lose that awareness. We sort of forget about it, but not completely. There's some element within us that's telling us we should be somehow much more than we are. Now, as long as we are in the physical body, and we operate with the limitations of the Newtonian world, we can never accomplish, we can never sort of reach the dimensions of our true nature, of divinity. We would have to become it all, or be it all, to really connect with our true nature. But there is a way of having an experience of our own divinity, the experience of Atman, Brahman, that you can achieve in an unordinary state of consciousness. And then when you come back in your everyday world, you would have that meta framework. When things get really difficult, you now have a sense of who you really are and what it is really about. And here I tell this Alexander the Great story. The story is about his conquest. He comes from Macedonia, takes all the territories all the way to India. He came as close as you can to the fulfillment of the Atman project. He was even called Divine Alexander. So when he arrived in India, he heard about this yogi who had the gift of seeing the future. So he decided to pay him a visit. And he would come there, and the yogi sort of sitting, in meditation, and he just, very rudely kind of interrupted him and said, "I'm Alexander the Great. I understand you can see future." And the yogi kind of nods. And Alexander says, "Okay, can you tell me if my conquest of India will be successful?" Now he has appetite for another subcontinent. And the yogi is kind of sitting, just barely opens his eye and says, "All you will eventually need is about 6 feet of ground," and just closes his eyes. So that's like the end of the greatest Atman project there is. So anyway, those are the levels of experiences that can somehow help us to deal with that kind of dissatisfaction that we have with ourselves and our life, where part of it really comes from the fact that we have not really been born. We got out anatomically, but a lot of the experience is still part of us. It's not finished. It's not fully processed. It's inexperienced experience. So that can sort of loosen that, and then then the most powerful remedy is really having that experience of oneness with the divine, and then recognizing that in some sense it is you, and it is this all of us, each of us. Okay, now let me look at the last, which is the snake, okay, which is violence. So where does violence come from? You can look at human history, and to a great extent it's history of violence and greed. Enormous amount of suffering, created in the history of humanity. Now, the current science gives you the explanation, which is, we are part of the animal kingdom. We are sort of highly developed animals, and aggression is a very important force in nature. So we, carry significant part of it. So all these things like the naked ape, the territorial imperative, Paul MacLean's idea of the triune brain that Wes described so beautifully, the reptilian, the mammalian brain, and so on. But there's a problem with this kind of explanation, which is really well expressed in Erich Fromm's book, which is called The Anatomy of Destructiveness. And what he shows there is that human violence is really different from animal violence. It's even worse, because we are violent without any good reason. The animals would be violent if they need to hunt, they need to feed themselves, or they might be sexual competition or defending territory. But you don't find anything comparable like to what happened in the Stalin archipelago or the Holocaust or the things that the Chinese did in Tibet. So Erich Fromm called this human violence malignant, as compared to just the aggression that is part of nature. Life feeds on life. So what did we find about this extra element of aggression in human nature? The first approach to explain that came from Dollard and Miller and other people, which started a whole line of exploring childhood. The fact that we have extremely long period of dependency on the parents, unlike little turtle who sort of hatches and is able to exist on his or her own. So we have this long period of dependency. We have security needs. We have needs for satisfaction. And if there is frustration of these basic needs, it generates feelings of aggression. So this would be related to our traumatic postnatal history. But then we discover some additional, much more fundamental sources of aggression on the perinatal level. If you realize that we are through a process which could have been hours, 1 hour, 2 hours, or days. There are deliveries that last like 3 days, and situation where the life of the fetus is seriously threatened, or there were people who were born dead. They had to be resuscitated. Tremendous amount of pain and anxiety, suffocation, and it generates powerful aggressive response, kind of a biological fury. We could take a volunteer to the swimming pool and hold the head underwater for a couple of minutes. You would see kind of, experimentally induced aggression. I mean, the person would kill when they cannot breathe. Sometimes people who are being rescued, drowning, take their rescuers with them. So there's this enormous amount of aggression generated that doesn't have anywhere to go. The child cannot scream, cannot fight, cannot move, escape from that situation. So a lot of these emotions and physical feelings are generated and they stay in the system. The little crying that happens after we are born is trivial as compared to what would be necessary to process that kind of an experience. So what we see in the breathwork, for example, in psychedelic sessions, in spiritual emergencies, people relive, it's not even correct description to call it relive, because it's really experiencing it fully for the first time. There's a wonderful paper that we referred to in our book by Ivor Brown, an Irish psychiatrist, which is called The Inexperienced Experience. It's people asking why reliving a trauma should be healing, why shouldn't be re-traumatization? And so, there are all kinds of reasons. The reason that you are there now as an adult person who has different resources than the child had. But the important part of it is that you are experiencing this fully for the first time. Before it was kind of recorded in the body and in the psyche, but it was not really fully brought into consciousness. So we were born anatomically, but we were not born emotionally. We didn't really arrive. So that is an important, significant part of the malignant aggression that we carry. But then we also have the archetypal realm. So there is a lot of aggression that is associated with the archetypal figures, with archetypal motifs. There are death gods of different cultures. There are sort of violent archetypes. There's the apocalypse, the Ragnarok, the doom of gods. We could have past life experiences in which there was a lot of violence. We were involved in some battle and so on. So this aggression is present in the psyche on many different levels. Part associated with the traumas that we experience postnatally, then the aggression that was generated in the birth canal. I didn't have anywhere to go. Remember that engulfment picture that I was showing, where she was turning into a little devil? There was like this, the swallowing, and then she was actually turning into the devil. So there's a lot of the aggression on the perinatal level, and then we have also aggression as part of various archetypal motifs. Now the good news is that all those levels are available in holotropic states. You can really reach the aggression on those levels, and you can work with it. You can express it with support. Okay, now when I wrote a book, Realms of the Human Unconscious, which was my first book, I described the perinatal matrices, and what I mentioned there is that when your self-exploration reaches the perinatal level, that for many people it tends to open into the collective unconscious, and suddenly you would be experiencing yourself as being involved in some battle, in some war, in revolution. So let's say as you are in the second matrix, you would be experiencing yourself in a prison, in a torture chamber of the Inquisition, in the concentration camp, being the victim. You get to the third matrix, and it will be, if there's a battle, you would be also the warrior or the perpetrator. You would go from the role of being the victim to being the perpetrator, and then also watching that whole scene. So I described this, and I got a letter from a man called Lloyd DeMause, D-E-M-A-U-S-E, who is a journalist, a psychoanalyst, and he's a founder of a movement called psychohistory, application of depth psychology to basically politics and history. They would be, psychohistorians would be studying the childhood of presidents and military leaders and try to understand their decision-making from their individual history. Or they would study child-rearing practices and link them to the nature of revolution. Child-rearing practices in Tsarist Russia and the Bolshevik Revolution, and then child-rearing practices before the Civil War, and then comparing the two revolutions and how they are related to the child-rearing practices. So I got a letter from Lloyd de Moos, and he was very excited about this material. He said that it really validates his own historical research. That he had become interested in the situation prior to wars and prior to revolutions. What do the demagogues do to mobilize civilians, to turn a population of peaceful civilians overnight into these killing machines? What is the mechanism? So by the time he wrote me the letter, he had studied 17 situations prior to these kinds of events. He studied the speeches, he got into the archives, sometimes he got drafts where there were even things that didn't get into the speech, or there were doodles, little drawings on the side. Anyway, he found out that all these speeches had one common denominator, which is the leader, the demagogue, would be using imagery of biological birth. You see? The enemy is closing in, has our throat in the grip, is squeezing last air out of our lungs. We don't have enough space, we are crowded. Hitler used to say, wir haben nicht genug Lebensraum, we don't have enough space to live. And then promising the solution also in terminology of birth. But there is light on the other side of the tunnel, and I will lead you there, and we will all breathe freely. The promise of free breathing is like a common denominator in revolution. We are oppressed, we are choked, and we need air. And what we do something so that we can breathe freely again. Okay, now snake. Again, I talked about the two types of snakes. One is the poisonous snake, the viper, which is the imminence of death, but also beginning of initiation. This could be seen as an initiation process, psycho-spiritual death rebirth. I think I mentioned in Pompeii there's this beautiful Villa dei Misteri, and the frescoes portray a Dionysian ritual, the death rebirth ritual, and it begins with a bite by a viper, by a poisonous snake. And of course the boa constrictor is very perinatal, swallowing the prey and looking pregnant, and then also crushing. So the idea here is that the leader is not a kind of a big paternal figure, but more like a garbage collector, that we carry a lot of these perinatal energies in our body, in our psyche, and that it happens sometime that these are activated on a very large scale. So a certain kind of atmosphere develops of threat, and the leader is somebody who has very close access to these perinatal energies, and he steps out and then formulates it for people and expresses it in terms of perinatal language, and promises the solution in perinatal terminology. Now the interesting question would be, why should the perinatal energies sort of rise at certain times? And you can complement it with Rick Tarnas, with his book Cosmos and Psyche, where he shows systematically the same kind of a planetary transit at the time of wars and revolutions. He really went through history and showed that these times are associated with, like, Saturn, Pluto, Mars transits. So, yeah, just the last thing that I would say, that he believed that we should learn this perinatal symbolism the way we learned the Freudian symbolism. You can't fool people now by Freudian symbolism in advertising and so on, because we know it. And that we should know the perinatal symbolism, that when the leader comes and says, we are choking thereafter as they're squeezing air out of our lungs, you say, this is not a good reason to go to war. You should do some inner work on this. Anyway, I'm finished, Jack, so it's all yours.